Tunisia is facing its biggest crisis in a decade of democracy. The country, which is often celebrated as the success model of the Arab Spring, is once again caught in the middle of a political and economic turmoil. The president of Tunisia has removed the prime minister and suspended parliament and has insisted that his actions were unconstitutional. Rivals have condemned the president for attacking democracy, and all this has now triggered mass celebrations, protests and clashes. Let's tell you a little bit about the celebrations happening on ground. The protesters who were opposing the ruling party have celebrated on the streets of the capital, Tunis. The celebrations were marked with fireworks, loud cheering and honking. Tens of thousands of people flooded Tunis to celebrate the government's dismissal. President Kais Saied supporters gathered in front of Parliament to denounce the Ennahda party. The area was cordoned off by the military after protesters chanted slogans against the party and even blocked followers of the party from reaching the building. Protesters also gathered outside the army-blocked Parliament to protest against the largest party. Several hundred supporters chanted slogans and blocked followers of the party from reaching the building. Street clashes erupted outside the Parliament, which has been ordered to remain shut for a period of 30 days. Soldiers blockaded the assembly in Tunis, while the president's supporters hurled stones and insults. The leader of the Ennahda party has now staged a sit-in to protest for being barred entry to the complex. The police released tear gas to disperse people near an Ennahda party building. The dramatic move by the president comes after prolonged deadlock between the president, the premier and the Ennahda chief. Even though the constitution enshrines a parliamentary democracy, it largely limits presidential powers to security and diplomacy. But President Saied has officially plunged the young democracy into a constitutional crisis with this speech.
First decision, freezing the functions of the parliament. The constitution does not allow its dissolution, but it allows the freezing of its activities. Second decision, the lifting of the parliamentary immunity of all deputies. Third decision, the President of the Republic will take charge of the executive power with the help of the government, which will be headed by a new leader appointed by the President of the Republic.
Now, for a better understanding about the developments in Tunisia, Mohammed Dia Hamami, who is a political science researcher and analyst, now joins us live from Tunis. Thanks so much for joining us. My first question, Tunisia is currently facing its worst crisis in a decade of democracy. So what are the primary reasons behind the president's decision to oust the government and freeze parliament?
According to him, the main reason is the continuous deterioration of the overall situation. There are three crises happening at the same time, and the executive authorities were not able to handle them in a correct way. The first one is the economic crisis that started actually a while ago and is still ongoing. Added to that, the COVID crisis. And now it's becoming a political crisis. And yesterday there was a wave of protests. It's not clear who called for these protests, but the intervention of the president comes in this context.
Right. Now, there are also visuals coming in of celebrations on the ground with people saying that this is the happiest they have been since the revolution. So what does this say about the state of governance in the country?
Like I mentioned, the celebration represents only one part of the society. And this is not the first time we've seen similar celebrations. Actually, the night the former dictator left the country, we had similar celebrations. So it doesn't mean that much, I think. It just shows that there is a popular support to radical measures that may or may not solve Tunisia's structural problems.
Right. Now, my final question for you. There is no clarity as of now as to when a new premier will be appointed. So do you expect more mayhem and violence on the streets?
The old political actors called for an abstention from the use of violence, with no exception. And we don't really have a tradition of violence on the street. There have been 2 political assassinations in 2013, but apart from that, in Tunisian contemporary history, we don't really have fights between different parts of the population. It's not a feature of Tunisian society. But we also can't predict what can happen in the future.
Right, Mr. Hamami, thank you so much for all your inputs and for joining us from Tunis. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.